birth to a beautiful baby girl, who was as white as snow, and as red as blood, and as black as ebony wood. And she named the child Snow White, and then she died from giving birth to her. Well, a year later, the king took for himself a new wife, and she was a beautiful woman, but she was also very cruel and proud and arrogant. And she had a magic mirror, and every day she would stand before her mirror and she would say, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is the fairest of them all?" And the mirror would reply, "You, my queen, are the fairest of all." And she would be satisfied, for she knew that the mirror only spoke the truth. However, as little Snow White grew older, she also became more and more beautiful, until one day, on Snow White's 7th birthday, the queen stood before her mirror and asked the question, to which the mirror replied, "You, my queen, are fair, it is true, but young Snow White is yet more fair than you." And she became... How dare it? And the queen became green with envy, and she knew that she would have no rest until Snow White was dead. So she called to her side a huntsman, and she told him to take the child out deep, deep into the forest and to kill her and bring back her heart as proof that she was dead. And so the huntsman did as he was told, and he took Snow White deep into the forest, but just as he was raising the knife to plunge it into her heart, Snow White fell to the ground and began to weep and begged the huntsman to have mercy. And she was so lovely that the huntsman had to take pity on her. So he told her, "Run off into the woods, child, and never come back." And Snow White ran off, and the huntsman returned to the castle, and as he was heading back, a wild boar crossed his path, and he killed the boar instead and cut out its heart. And when he returned to the castle, he gave the heart to the queen, who believed it was the heart of Snow White, and she had her cook it up with a little salt and pepper, and that made her supper for the evening. Grimm brothers. Well, meanwhile, Snow White ran through the forest, and she was so frightened until it was almost nightfall when she came to a little cottage. And she knocked on the door, but nobody entered. And so she went in and found a little table with 7 little plates and 7 little cups. And she ate a little meat from each plate, and she drank a little wine from each cup. And then she was very, very tired, so she went to the bedroom where there were 7 little beds. And though she tried every bed, it wasn't until she got to the 7th one that she felt it was just right, and she fell fast asleep. That night, the owners of the cottage came home, and it was the 7 little dwarves who spent their days mining for gold in the mountains. And they were very surprised to find that somebody had been eating from their plates and drinking from their cups. And of course, when they went into the bedroom, they saw Snow White lying there, but she was so lovely that they dared not to wake her. So they waited, and when Snow White woke up, she was very frightened, but they said, "Don't be afraid, child, we won't harm you. Tell us how you've come to be in our cottage." And so Snow White told them how her stepmother had tried to kill her. And the dwarves said, "You are welcome to stay with us as long as you do the cooking and the cleaning and the mending and take care of everything." And she said, "That's probably the best deal I'm going to get," so she accepted. And she stayed with the dwarves. However, back at the castle the next day, the queen once again stood in front of her magic mirror and once again said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is the fairest of them all?" To which the mirror replied, "You, my queen, are fair, it is true, but beyond the mountains where the 7 dwarves dwell, little Snow White is still alive and well." And she became furious, realizing that the huntsman had tricked her. And so she determined that she would find a way to be rid of Snow White once and for all. So she dressed herself as an old peddler woman, and she traveled through the forest to the cottage. And when she arrived, she cried out, "Wares for sale, beautiful wares for sale." And Snow White came to the door and asked what she was selling. And the old witch pulled out the most beautiful silken stay laces that Snow White had ever seen. And Snow White absolutely had to have them. So they agreed on a price, and the witch said, "Oh, but you look a fright, child. You must let me tighten you up into your laces like a proper young lady." And Snow White agreed, and the witch cinched up her laces, but she tied it so tight that Snow White could no longer breathe, and she fell to the ground as if dead. Luckily, the dwarves arrived not home arrived home not long later. And when they saw Snow White, they immediately saw the problem. They cut open the stay laces, and she revived. And then she told them what had happened, and they knew that it was her, none other but the wicked queen, her stepmother, who had tried to kill her. And they said, "Snow White, you must not let anybody else in." And she agreed. Well, of course, thanks to the magic mirror, the queen soon realized that she had failed. So she concocted a second plan. Using the power of witchcraft, which she had mastered, she had created a beautiful rhinestone comb. But the tines of the comb were poisoned. And again, she dressed herself up as an old peddler woman, and she traveled through the forest to the cottage, and again she cried out, "Wares for sale, beautiful wares for sale." And Snow White came to the window and said, "I'm sorry, the dwarves have forbidden me to let anybody in." And the queen said, "That's fine, I can show you my wares from here." And she held up the comb, and it was so beautiful that Snow White had to have it. So they agreed on the price, and the queen said, "Oh, but you look terrible, child. You must let me comb your hair like a proper young lady." And Snow White agreed, and the queen began to comb her hair, but one of the tines pricked Snow White's scalp, and she fell to the ground as if dead. Well, when the dwarves arrived home that night, they searched her and they found the comb, and as soon as they had pulled it free, Snow White was revived. And she told them what had happened, and the dwarves said, "Really, Snow White? You have to stop letting in the old women. Like, stop it. Don't let anybody else in." And Snow White agreed. So, again, the queen soon realized that she had once again failed, and she determined that this time she would come up with a plan that would keep Snow White dead forever. And she went into her darkest chambers of the castle, and there she created a poisoned apple. And it was red on one side and white on one side, and it was the most beautiful apple in existence. And anybody who saw it would desire to taste it. And again, she dressed herself up as an old lady, and she wandered across the forest to the cottage, and she knocked at the door. And Snow White came to the window and said, "I'm sorry, the dwarves have forbidden me to let anybody enter." And the queen said, "That's all right, I'll show you what I have from here." And she held up the apple, and Snow White thought, "Oh, that looks like a really good apple." "Oh, but I've had such bad luck with these old peddlers lately. I really shouldn't eat it, but thank you." And the queen said, "But are you afraid of poison? Here, let me show you. I will cut the apple in half, and I shall eat the white half, and you shall eat the red." For she'd been very clever, and only the red half was poisoned. And she did just that, and she took a bite, and when Snow White saw her eating it, she thought surely it must be safe. And so Snow White took a bite of the apple, but no sooner had it passed her lips than she fell to the ground dead. And the queen cackled to herself and thought, surely she cannot survive this. And the queen returned to her castle and stood before her magic mirror and said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is the fairest of them all?" And the mirror replied, "You, my queen, are the fairest of all." And she was finally at peace. Well, that night, when the dwarves came home, they searched and searched Snow White, but they could find no way to save her. And so they thought surely she had been lost forever, and they cried and wept over her body for 3 days. But Snow White never changed. She just went on as if she was merely sleeping. And the dwarves thought, we cannot bury her in the cold, dark ground. So instead, they had a beautiful glass coffin made, and they put Snow White into the coffin where she could be seen from all sides, and they left her in the forest so that even the animals and the beasts could come and mourn for her. And the years passed, and Snow White went on as if she was merely sleeping. Until one day, a prince happened by the forest, and he saw Snow White in her coffin, and he thought, she is the most lovely thing I have ever laid eyes on. I am sure that I love her dearly. And he begged, because that's how love works. And he begged the dwarves to let him have Snow White, but one of the servants tripped, and the coffin went flying and crashed, and the apple burst out of Snow White's throat. Because all she really needed was the Heimlich maneuver. And she awoke with a start, and she looked around and asked, goodness me, where am I? And the prince said, you are with me, and I love you more than anything in this world. Will you please come back to the castle and be my wife? And she thought, that's a better deal than living with the dwarves. So I'm gonna take it. and she agreed to be his wife. Well, on the day of the wedding, the evil queen dressed up in her finest gown, and she once again stood before her mirror and said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is the fairest of them all?" To which the mirror replied, "You, my queen, are fair, it is true, but the young queen is 1,000 times more fair than you." And she became red with rage, and she determined she must go and see this new queen. And so she went to the wedding. When she saw that it was none other than Snow White, who she was sure she had killed, she became horrified, and she couldn't even move. She was frozen to the ground. But Snow White and the prince had been expecting her to come, and they had had a special pair of iron shoes crafted. And all day, those shoes had been sitting in the hottest coals of the fire until they were glowing hot. And they forced the queen to strap the shoes onto her feet and dance for their wedding entertainment until she fell down dead. The end.
Looking for the car so we can get home and read Winter.
And watch our shows.
Yeah, Arrow. We
Catch
just
up on
missed
Arrow.
Yeah, I'm so tired though.
Felicity.
I wish we got to like actually vlog us meeting her, but they were holding our camera, so we'll just add the pictures like now or sometime in it.
Yeah.
But check out our Instagram for more pictures of it though. And yeah,
At drowninginfandomfeels.
hope you guys liked all of the.
Gonna get hit
I'm
by
gonna
a
get hit by a
car.
car. Hope
All
you
right.
guys. Hope you guys liked the videos of her telling us the Snow White fairy tale. It was really cool. I'm gonna step in a puddle. Bye.
Bye.